took 50 minutes for Maybe I Do to get interesting. And after that point, the last kind of 30, 40 minutes were really, really good. The first 50 minutes are really boring. This was released this year in 2023, directed by Michael Jacobs, and stars a brilliant cast with Diane Keaton, Richard Gere, Susan Sarandon, William H. Macy, Emma Roberts, and Luke Bracey. And the narrative seems complex, but it's actually quite straightforward. Michelle and Alan are in a relationship, and unbeknownst to everybody, Michelle's mother is having an affair with Alan's father. Michelle's father is having an affair with Alan's mother. And none of the characters know about the affairs apart from obviously the people in the affairs. The people having the affairs don't realise that their children are dating the other person's child. And I was waiting because we had obviously the setup to get to know the characters and their relationships and what was going on, but you don't need 50 minutes to set things up. I was just waiting for them to find out and to see how that would unfold. And it took 50 minutes. And they all meet because Michelle and Alan have decided to get married and they're going to talk to their parents about it. And the whole film is basically a conversation about different kinds of love, how love can change over the years, different expectations, and what love actually is. And I think it does provide some interesting discussions, some interesting viewpoints. It definitely does that quite well. And honestly, once it got to the 50-minute mark, and I did time it, it was about 52 minutes, I think, and the two sets of parents come together and the pennies dropped for the respective affair couples, I loved it and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that's partly down to, of course, the fantastic cast, but also because I just think those scenes after that point were really well written. And we had about 40 minutes of some really great conversations, characters acting in some interesting ways, particularly Sam and Howard. Richard Gere was fantastic as Howard. William H. Macy was rather adorable as Sam. He's a very sweet individual, a really lovely character. And the way they responded to it was pretty entertaining. There are definitely some funny moments in this, but I wouldn't say it's a comedy as such. It is classed as a rom-com. Honestly, the first 50 minutes might as well not exist. I'm not suggesting that if you watch it, you just jump to the 50-minute mark, because I think some setting up is good, but honestly, it wasn't good until things really kicked in, and we could have removed about 35 minutes from the scenes before that, and we would have lost nothing. You would have been fully aware of what was going on, had all of the information needed. So the pacing is terrible for the first 50 minutes. Absolutely horrendous. The only thing that kept me moderately engaged was the fact we have this brilliant cast whose performances I enjoyed watching, and I think they did a good enough job with, well, what they had to work with, but unfortunately what they had to work with to begin with was horrendous. So I'd say it's worth watching once you get to a certain point, but I feel like they should have done that much sooner. And instead of making it 50 minutes in for the action to kick in, it should have been maybe within 20 minutes, and then characters could have reacted very differently. I can't really tell you how I think they should have reacted because that would give away for how they did react. And I don't want to spoil it because I think certain characters had responses that I maybe wasn't expecting, and that was interesting. But the point is, they could have reacted in some way and then spent more time fleshing that out and then discussing it more and providing more commentary on these different situations. But unfortunately, they decided to not go with that. When I started watching this, and for the first 50 minutes, I was honestly expecting to say this was one of the most boring films I've ever seen. But I can't say that because the second half of it was just fabulous. And the first half is horrendous and is irrelevant, almost. As I said, we do need some setting of the scene to get to know the dynamics, the different characters. I get it. But not for 50 minutes. And I would recommend it. But I'd say if you're bored for a lot of it, stick with it. Because it is worth it. It is absolutely worth it. Definitely a film of two halves. So much room for improvement, so much unnecessary padding and fluff to begin with, but once it got to the good stuff, boy did it deliver. So I couldn't even give this a star rating. I'm so glad I don't typically give star ratings because I don't know what I'd do with it. Really loved the second half, absolutely hated the first half. If you watch it, definitely let me know what you think of it. And if you can give it a star rating, what would you give it? I genuinely don't know. But either way, I'm glad. I don't tend to stop watching films most of the time unless unless I'm repulsed by it, which is never really happening. I wouldn't ever turn off a film. I usually persevere. And I'm glad that I did with a film like this because it actually paid off on this occasion. So stick with it. If you've started watching it and gave up, I would actually recommend going back and watching at least from the 50-minute mark. I think it was just after 50 minutes, but I did kind of pay attention to the time when I realised, oh, this is what I've been waiting for, and it's just been dragging its heels, as I'm very much doing with the conclusion of this discussion. Amazing film in the second half, terrible in the first half, worth persevering with. But having said all of that, I doubt I'd watch it again.